Hello, good afternoon. I think it's time to start the afternoon program of the land, so of this festive meeting of the Land Society, and it starts with the panel discussion on organization of science. First, we will have short presentations of the panelists, and then will be the discussion. And let me call first Gerd Folkers from ETH Zürich.
Thank you very much for this very honorable and kind invitation, Martin. Thank you. We had a perfect speech this morning, so Mark paved the way for the whole afternoon. So for me, my only task is to give some illustrations or some graphics for that, because I agree to a large extent what he tackled. So I called my talk "The Public Life of Scientific Facts," and I have to start with a definition, which is also my conviction, what it means to do scientific research. And I would differentiate research and science in the terms of scientific research. Research can be done at a lot of places and a lot of areas, but it's not always scientific research, or not along this definition. I took that from Günther Abel. You see the quote down there. To do research means to produce scientific knowledge about the subjective experience by asking why questions, search for systematically already answered, proceed methodologically ordered, justified statements by reason and evidences in their validity, and leave behind strangleholds of ideology and false authority. So the last point is important in politics today. I have brought only one slide, and this is what I call the public life of scientific facts. And in the task is easy to do science, to find new things, to have new facts. But I remember you that a scientific fact is a factum, which means is made. Data, dare, is given. A factum is facere, made. So we will have to discuss the data and the factum philosophy probably afterwards. It starts here in the lab. So you have an invention or a discovery, you have something new, and the task is simple to include it into the knowledge system. But there are some hurdles. The black hurdles or the black supporters are academic or from the scientific community. The other ones are from the public or the society or media or other influences. I roughly parted it in three areas: the scientific community down here, the scientific fact question mark over here, and the public or the society over here. What happens if you start as a PhD student to tell your supervisor what you have found? There will probably first an internal review. Then you prepare a presentation to a broader scientific audience, conference or a meeting. Then already the problem starts, as Mark indicated this morning. Is it patentable or not? Should we make a patent? Should it be free science? Should it be useful science? So that is exactly the point where your vice president for research probably talks to you, where you probably carefully read the instructions for authors in the journals to find out what happens if you do not patent it. I can tell you, you lose everything. The question is, should you? Then publication in the scientific journals. You know all the procedure. If you have money enough, you can buy a cover paper. If you have even more money, you can buy a first author, and so on and so on. Not necessary to discuss this, is very well known to you. And here it already starts that there are a relationship to retrieval systems from the journal, and from the retrieval systems to the internet, of course, to the media and to the publisher. because the publishers themselves use already the ranking of the journals, the cover papers, the news, the impact of the news to do PR for themselves. So they will directly, without contacting you, contact media, open social media, and so on and so on. So that's the first circle we're going. And then you end up here in the cloud enterprises, retrieval systems, the libraries, the encyclopedia, which very quickly is related to the taxpayers, because spectacular news, even if they are not spectacular in terms of sciences, will enter the media much easier, and the internet much easier, and the libraries much easier, and the ranking of the scientific societies much easier than the other ones. This ranking is quantum physics at the lower end, and cancer on top. So you have also ranking within the topics. And this is reflected very clearly in the news. This is reflected very clearly in the clicks in the internet. And this leads in a circle between retrieval system, media publishers, and these exchanges in social media in an inclusion-exclusion system. So there is not you, or there is not the scientific community that decides whether this is a novelty or a hype or simply ignorance. It is decided by a much larger community that influence each other and has a feedback system. And it has an exploding feedback system, an autocatalytic feedback system. From here, unfortunately, it flips back with this ranking and rating to political institutions. Because also the political institution, my Secretary of State, is a fan of the internet and looks up rankings and can exactly tell me what my H*I blah index is if I get 5 minutes to visit her. Then the political institution, and especially the administration of the political institution, of course, influence again the ranking, the hiring, and the granting organization. So in the Swiss National Science Foundation, politics are part of the foundation of the foundation that speaks the money for the scientific projects. And again, because my school, ETH Zürich, is directly under the government, so we get direct money from the government. They should not be, but they are involved in hiring. And then it comes back to hiring, granting organization, to the project. So that is the circle that we are in. Now we have 2 new developments that makes these circles even more interesting. The first one is the bookkeeping system SAP. You probably know it. Novartis has SAP, Lufthansa has SAP. I'm sure that all the governments use SAP. It tells you precisely for every person in an organization what is your role, where are you in the system, what is your task, what are the deliverables at the end of the year. And since universities, in my perspective, have become more and more and more and more economic or economical driven because they had to, this bookkeeping system got an important instrument in judging upon the performance of labs or single persons. And the second is AI. You see it down there? Yeah. This new player now starts to write reviews. Fine. But it also starts to read reviews. Now, if you use the right keywords, that may be of an advantage. but you never know how this language system develops. So I hear from the first publishers that they use AI to sort out the first 50% of manuscripts that do not fit to the publisher. I hear from Europe, ERC, that they think about AI. I hear from all kinds of students that they are enthusiastic of AI. I just talked to my friend and colleague. I always test these AI models by have them writing my CV. And I already attended twice my funeral. So be careful. This is more or less what I wanted to show you. And this, of course, relates to everything said in the morning. Critical thinking, responsibility, what is doing science, what is the difference to research, what is scientific research, should we keep the Hambletonian system, and so on and so on. And we will come back to that in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let me, so next speaker is Matthias Christandl.
Well, thank you very much, first and foremost, to Martin for inviting me to come here. And it's a pleasure. I'm working in the area of quantum information science. I'm a physicist by training from ETH, actually. I'm a professor in the math department in Copenhagen, and my ESC grants are from the computer science panel. And at the moment, I'm working with chemists and biologists on applications. So I would like to tell you my view on this interdisciplinary area. And I want to first tell you a bit about the area. I hope I can take that minute from you. I will click through it quickly. First of all, what is information? Information, there's a unit of information, the bits, 0 and 1. It's an abstract concept independent of its implementation. But you can implement it, for instance, with smileys or with light switches or more advanced technology if you want. Shannon and Turing in 1940s came up with the idea that all physical information can be represented by this abstract units, bits. So it's like the other direction, right? So whenever you see a bit, and then you can abstract it. And this is really the basis for the digital revolution, for everything, including AI, etc. With a mantra that everything is information, a human universe, you can even play it further. And then, of course, also for the internet and so on. Now, what is quantum information? So Shannon and Turing, they said all physical information can be represented by bits. So that's that direction. But if you have a particle that can be either to the left or to the right, or you have an atom that can be in 0, 1, so I'm in Copenhagen, as Niels Bohr's atomic model here, then you will quickly discover that quantum mechanics tells you that actually that's not all that can happen. They can also be in superposition of 0 and 1. And therefore, it's not or, but it's kind of like and. And really, Shannon and Turing's hypothesis go out the window, and you have to replace it by Deutsch-Feynman's understanding that all physical information can be represented by quantum bits. That's the abstraction. That is what we say leads to the second quantum revolution, namely quantum computers, quantum communication systems, where everything is quantum information from the human to the universe. And so the European Union, some decades ago by now, started making these pillars. I'm not a great fan of this picture, but it serves its purpose now, to show you how the interdisciplinarity involved in changing an entire architecture of the internet, just to speak into a new way. So let me actually see if I have a laser pointer here. So there's, of course, basic science down there. But then there is the applications, if you say so, like communication, computation, simulation, sensing, metrology. There's different kind of aspects involved. There's education, training, software theory. Now imagine you have to recreate everything now in a new light of a new technology. Like literally the bits go out and you replace them by quantum bits. It's a huge revolution. So it requires collaboration on the hardware, on the building things like physics, engineering, on quantum hardware. It requires computer science and mathematics, and maybe you can say something like quantum software. It requires applications in chemistry, biology, particularly my favorite ones. I call it quantum applications. And then, of course, it has impact, society, law, and now you can throw AI on top of all of this. There is academia and industry. These are also two aspects of that have to come in. As I said before, so as soon as I arrived and became professor in the math department, and regardless of where I showed up within the university system, everyone told me that I'm a mathematician. And being in Copenhagen, actually, people were kind of like, you're not a phys. Oh, you're doing quantum, but not in a physics, not in the Niels Bohr Institute. How's that possible? So there is this. People really love to put you in the corner and like put you in a box. And I kind of like I'm still profoundly disappointed because I started even my master thesis in this area. And I thought somehow 25 years later, we would have come further, and we haven't. So at the University of Copenhagen, I'm one of the initiators of what we call the University of Copenhagen Quantum Hub as a forum. There's no money involved. Everyone is welcome. It's bottom up, from researchers to researchers, from students to students, to break this department boundaries. Yeah, I'm disappointed. We still have to do this, but it's apparently necessary. So we built this structure. Here are the different departments. There's computer science, math, physics, biology, chemistry, with the applications around it. We have to connect ourselves within internally. Then the other fact, this is all within the Faculty of Science, that of course is sort of like the main aspect of driving quantum computing research. But we have to bring it together with the other faculties that, as I mentioned already, even the theologians are interested. Philosophy, of course, comes into this game. Connection to the outside world. There is this whole innovation aspect that the Ernest director this morning was also emphasizing as a third one. Right, research, education, maybe innovation now as well, and so this one here is the connection. Also, we are kind of like the research version of what the students have in an interdisciplinary science master program. And we put a PhD program funded by the Willem Foundation now on top of it, connecting it to this. So to give you a bit of an idea of that, I think this was a very nice speech. I liked it this morning. So on the science, we have to do the interdisciplinarity. On the education, on the research, that's what this quantum hub does. And then you have you also have the innovation aspect, and that is maybe the innovation aspects, maybe the easiest one to do, actually, the interdisciplinarity, probably in some sense. Right. So yeah, we did some event. We had an opening in 22. We're running colloquia. We're running annual events, etc., and we're running these events here to bring quantum to society. And I should sort of like one thing that I really found interesting here was that I ran this together with this Quantum Society meeting. There's very subtle things that can be highly relevant. And when we ran this, it was panel discussions like this one here. But my colleague from political science, she said, we're going to do this at 9 in the morning. Okay, so at 9:30 or 9:30 in the morning, we ran like on 3 Wednesday mornings, panel discussions, pretty much the center of town. Where she managed to invite like the ministries, etc. And, lo and behold, half a year later, I was briefing the entire government of Denmark, including the prime minister. All ministers were there on quantum computing. So the impact and realities of like interdisciplinary science also comes into play here. And in my small corner of the quantum information science part, we are doing the algorithm part, just the theory part, but of course there in itself there's a lot of interdisciplinarity, and it's that one that brought me here to Prague, because with my colleagues back from the Durhus and Jan Philipp Soloway, we started the Center for Mathematics of Quantum Theory, and in this context I met Martin, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you. You can.
Thank you very much, and Matthias. And it's in fact a very good publicity for tomorrow event, where we will have quantum duel about the existence of relevant quantum computers, where Matthias is one of the duelists, and second duelist is Gil Kalai, which please, Gil, tell us something.
Thanks a lot for the invitation, and I was also very much impressed by Mark and previous presentations, and I will move away today from quantum computing to some thoughts about science and diversity in a small country, and I think science need this balance between organization and between some inherent mess, which is quite important. So I want to start, and this is related to the mission of science, with two quotes from Edmund Landau. So Edmund Landau was one of the founder, or maybe perhaps the main founder of the Institute of Mathematics at the Hebrew University, and he learned Hebrew. He moved to Israel, Palestine at the time, the mandatory Palestine, and he gave a speech in the opening of the university, and also he wrote a paper in Hebrew about 23 important number theory problems. Let me read you. So his first quote is, "May great benefit emerge from this house, dedicated to pure science, which does not know borders between people and people. And may this awareness emerges from Zion and penetrate the hearts of all those who are still far from this view." So Landau's view was that science can be a tool to lower or eliminate borders between people, and he advocated this idea, and he thought that science can have such a role in society as a whole. The ending of his second paper was less ambitious, and at the end he explained why we care about all these problems in number theory, and he said, "We deal with science for the sake of it, and dealing with it was a solace in the days of internal and external war that we as Jews and as Germans, we fought and still fight today." So he thought for a scientist, concentrating on these problems that have no practical application, at least is give you a sense of comfort in very difficult times. And we see that now, 100 years later, we are still experiencing very difficult and sad times. So my connection with organization of science, it's it is one. I can mention this answer to a mass overflow question. So mass overflow is a question and answer site in mathematics, which is very successful. And this relates to another new feature of science, which is open science over the internet. That can be useful, it can be unuseful, and it's very interesting what's happening. And somebody asked about means of promoting mathematics in young countries, and I gave some advice. Actually, I didn't write them from scratch. It's some recycling of some advice that I gave in 2001 on the occasion of some visiting committee to Argentina, and I told the story about the Israeli science. So I mentioned the importance of immigration, which is, it has a huge importance, both in the beginning and in the middle of our scientific journey. Our policy to, once we hire somebody, we actually ask him, now we don't want to see you anymore. Go to sabbatical, go to conferences. And so we had this policy for high incentives for going to sabbaticals. And I mentioned a few other things about organization of science, salaries, and so on. I also mentioned that I thought it's important to maintain a sense of tradition areas of your community, your scientific community, which are not always the mainstream area. And also I mentioned the fact that self-breeding can work. So there is a big thing that self-breeding is very harmful, but for our department, our community, actually self-breeding was quite good. And I also mentioned the importance of self-confidence, tolerance, and so on. So let me, in this spirit, tell you a little bit about the Institute of Mathematics. So as I mentioned, it was established by Edmund Landau, who moved to Palestine then for 2 years. And they started teaching in 1927. And among the first teachers were Binyamin Amira and Divsha Amira. They both wanted higher education. They were high school students in Palestine, so they had to move to Europe to pursue undergraduate and graduate studies, and they returned as PhDs. And Amira joined as a faculty, and Divsha Amira was a high school teacher, but she joined for the first year. And also Isaac Schenberg, who was also a student of Landau, and he came for a year to Jerusalem. Then he married the Landau daughter and moved to the United States. And then the department was based on 2 professors that established the main area. Frenkel, who established the area of logic, Fekete, who established the area of analysis, and Levitsky, who established the area of algebra. And I want to zoom in on logic at the Hebrew University, which is a quite an amazing story amazing story. And Frenkel joined the department. He's famous for being one of the founder of axiomatic set theory. And some years later, Abraham Robinson, which started in fluid dynamics, he moved to logic, and he also joined the department for several years. And they established generations of logicians. The second generation, so Robinson was already a second generation, and there was also a well-known philosopher, Bar Hillel, who did logic. And then the third generation were Azriel Levi, Michael Rabin, and 2 other, Moshe Machover, which was a few years in Jerusalem, and Yoram Hirschfeld, who moved to Tel Aviv and established there the logic school. And Rabin, at some point, decided to move to what we call today computer science, which is very close to logic, except that logic was conceived as the purest part of mathematics, which is completely useless. And Rabin immediately was interested in the most practical aspects of computer science. And he also wrote that other mathematicians were not very attentive, or didn't thought that this is an important intellectual endeavor. There was also Chaim Geifman, who was about that time. And then the next generation, as I said, many were already people who were educated in Jerusalem, like Megiddo, Saron Shelach, who is a very famous logician, and the other people who are mentioned here. Itamar Eliyahu Rips actually was an algebraist, but his work became connected to logic. And then there was a list of many good people, both in mathematics and in computer science, like Ehud Khrushchevsky and Tzlil Sela, and the list go on. And I think I even missed Guy Katz, who is a logician doing computer science. And you can see perhaps a little connection with quantum computing is that Michael Ben-Or was a student of Rabin, got interested in quantum computing, and together with Dorita Aronov, who is in the middle of the last pictures, they developed the so-called threshold theorem. So if quantum computers can be built, this will be largely based on this theorem that was proved by Ben-Or and Aronov and 2 other groups. And if quantum computers will not be built, as I think, even then, this threshold theorem will be very, very important. So let me just end with another aspect of academic life, and this is the question of diversity. It's highly debated matter, which relates both academics and politics. And there are the mood now is very different than it was, say, in the US 4 years or 5 years ago. And I personally think that diversity is a very important social and academic value, and it is important mean for academic excellence. So it's value, and it's valuable. It's a value on its own, and it's also a tool to promote academic excellence, to widen the circle of people who are interested in academia. And I think diversity should be promoted. I just want to mention, to brag about something that we did in 1993. So along with 4 other colleagues, Anders Bjorner and Noga Alon and Hélène Barcelot and Edna Vigdazon, we had a conference, a combinatorics conference in Jerusalem. And traditionally, although there were a fairly large percent of women combinatorialists, traditionally in conferences, there was 0, 1, or in some extreme cases, 2 speakers, women. And we decided to have a conference, a fairly large conference. Among the 30 plenary speakers, there were 16 women, and there were about half women among the 80 or so altogether speakers. And I think this was a very nice event, and also some statement about the importance of diversity. So let me end here. Oh, do I have another slide? No. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gil. Great. And let's continue with Břetislav Friedrich.
Well, many thanks to Martin for the invitation. So, in the following 10-minute interlude, I'd like to tell you a little bit about open science in general and about open access publishing in particular. Scientific publications are no doubt the principal means for disseminating and preserving scientific knowledge. Therefore, I hope that my contribution will have some relevance for today's panel discussion on organizing the scientific enterprise. What is open science all about? Here's an excerpt from a definition provided by UNESCO. Open science aims to make scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable for everyone, and to increase scientific collaborations and sharing of information for the benefits of science and society. Open science is based on values such as quality and integrity, and principles such as transparency, scrutiny, reproducibility, with all of the above enforced, when it comes to it, by a rigorous peer review. How did open science come about? It all started on the eve of the 21st century, when the World Conference on Science, acting under the aegis of UNESCO, adopted a declaration on science and the use of scientific knowledge. This declaration stated that in the 21st century, science must become a shared asset benefiting all peoples on the basis of solidarity. In 2002 in Budapest, a group of visionary academics, librarians, and publishers issued a statement that introduced the paradigm of open access publishing. This was followed in 2003 by the Bethesda Statement by the National Institutes of Health and by the Berlin Declaration by the Max-Planck Society. The Bethesda Statement and the Berlin Declaration spawned a movement that has been transformative for scientific publishing ever since. In 2018, a group of national research funding organizations with the support of the European Commission and the European Research Council announced the launch of Coalition S, with S standing for science. Coalition S is an initiative to mandate and full and immediate open access to the results of publicly funded scientific research. The latest major international development concerning open science took place at UNESCO's General Conference in 2021. On that occasion, UNESCO issued a recommendation on open science, whose aim was to provide an international framework for open science policy and practice. In this 36-page document, UNESCO recognized, I quote, the urgency of addressing complex and interconnected social and economic challenges for the people and the planet. UNESCO also acknowledged the vital importance of science, technology, and innovation in meeting these challenges, and emphasized the transformative potential of open science for reducing the existing inequalities in science, technology, and innovation. What does open science entail? So it's open access publishing. It's also sharing of research data. It's also sharing of educational resources. It's sharing of software. And it's even sharing of design specifications for hardware, tools, and samples. So far, the most widely implemented component of open science has been open access publishing. How far has open access publishing come? This figure shows the global publication output for research and review articles by open access category. By now, almost half of research and review articles are open access. Open access publishing benefits science itself, because science, regarded as an institution of organized criticism, can only function properly if researchers can scrutinize the work of others and make use of that work to inform their own research. Among the benefits of open access publishing are the higher citation rates of open access articles compared with citation rates of articles hidden behind paywalls. An illustrative example, open access articles in Wiley journals receive over 90% of total citations. How is scientific publishing paid for? In other words, what are the business models of scientific publishing? There is a traditional access toll model, also known as a subscription model. How does it work? Libraries of research institutions pay annual subscription fees to publishers in advance as a prepayment for the forthcoming issues of journals. These subscription fees are reading fees. In other words, in order to read a scientific publication, one has to surmount a paywall erected by the publishers. Among the triggers of the open science movement were some of the excesses or even outrages of the subscription business model. The authors were requested to transfer the copyright for their work to the publishers. The publishers refer to their confiscation of the copyright as the bedrock of the subscription system. The subscription fees were non-transparent, often hidden from public view by non-disclosure agreements between publishers and libraries. This enabled arbitrary pricing. Here, publishers include both commercial publishers, such as Wiley, Elsevier, Springer, Nature, you name it, and society publishers, such as the American Chemical Society or the British Institute of Physics. In 2015, the Max-Planck Digital Library found out that within the subscription system, the roughly 2 million research and review articles published annually cost libraries worldwide 7.6 billion euros. That is 3,800 euros per article, per paper. Within the open access business model, what is being paid for is not reading, but publishing. The authors or their institution or a consortium of institutions, sometimes a national one, is paying the publisher for publishing a given article that is then posted for everyone to read for free. There's no paywall to overcome for readers, whoever or wherever they are. The copyright stays with the authors. The article publishing charge is paid after publication as a post-payment and is calculated on the basis of the production costs. The publishers are forced to make their production costs transparent, especially if they are controlled by a national agreement. The so-called transformative agreements foster the transition from the subscription to the open access model. Transformative agreements represent a commitment to democratizing publicly funded research. Oops. There is a slide missing, but anyway. So I just wanted to mention that the open access business model reduces the cost per article significantly. It amounts to a great saving for the taxpayer, who largely funds the research as well as the reporting of the research. It surely makes good sense to use the public funds allocated for science to support research rather than to enable inordinate profits of the publishing industry, which has one of the highest profit margins of all industries, over 40%. That's more than Microsoft. Currently, the average cost of a research article published under the national so-called deal agreement in Germany is about 2,750 euros. And about 2/3 of German research output is published open access under deal. The slashing of indirect costs, as we currently see it happening in the US, affects adversely the funding of academic libraries. In particular, it ties the hands of those who negotiate cost-effective transformative agreements with publishers on behalf of the American research community. So the slashing does exactly the opposite what Doge claims, right? There is a missing slide, but anyway, let me mention that as part of the Wiley deal agreement, Wiley committed to supporting the creation of a new inter- and multidisciplinary journal based on open science principles. This journal was founded in 2020 and is called Natural Sciences. Its main competitors, Science and Nature, are both exempt from transformative agreements. One can still publish open access in them, but for exorbitant fees, such as 10,000 euros per article. In contrast, Natural Sciences charges standard APCs as stimulated by the national agreement. Better yet, since Natural Sciences is a new journal, the publication charges are waived throughout 2025 for everyone. A disclosure is in order. I'm one of the editors of this journal. Almost done. Within the open access business model, it is in the interest of the publishers to ramp up both the article publishing charge and the quantity of the articles published. While keeping the APCs under control is an issue primarily for the research funders to deal with, it is up to the editorial boards of open access journals to make sure that only quality publications get accepted. It is therefore essential for the editorial boards of open science journals to be independent of their publishers and to assume the role of something like the publisher's critical partners. Let me conclude by noting that open access publishing made headlines in 2023 when it was characterized by the Time magazine as one of the ways in which the world could better. Getting the world better is what we need. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bedřich. And our next speaker is Ondřej Beránek from Czech Academy of Sciences.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Also, my apologies. I didn't prepare any PowerPoint presentation, so you will just have to bear with me, or you can always look at the gentleman behind me. Now, I was asked to talk about the importance of scientific autonomy, decentralization, and also the role of non-university research. Now, these may sound like abstract terms, but I think they are really at the heart of how we safeguard the future of science and our societies. So let's start with autonomy. You all know that we are living in a world facing increasingly complex challenges: climate change, global health, disinformation, you name it. And in this world, scientific autonomy is not a luxury. It is a necessity. If we want science to produce credible, long-term knowledge, we need to protect it from political interference and short-term economic pressure. We see it in the countries that lead in innovation: Germany, France, the US, Japan. They all invest in pluralistic scientific systems where universities and independent research institutions work basically side by side, each bringing something essential. So let me summarize in 4 points why I believe autonomy matters. First, autonomy brings credibility and trust. Basically, independent research means results aren't shaped by politics. And when people trust that science serves truth, not power, they are more likely to accept evidence-based policies, especially in areas like public health or climate. Second, autonomy brings freedom to explore the difficult or unpopular. Scientific breakthroughs often come from uncertain or risky ideas. Autonomy gives scientists room to follow those paths, even when they are politically inconvenient. Third, science serves as a check and balance. Independent research institutions are essential in any democracy. They can question dominant narratives, they can challenge bad policy, and they can speak truth to power. That is strength, not a threat. And fourth, it helps attracting talent and international cooperation. Basically, top researchers want to work where they have freedom. That's a no-brainer, right? So what happens when autonomy is undermined? Science gets politicized, agendas are written to serve governments, not scientific relevance, quality and innovation suffer, people self-censor, countries lose standing, they are excluded from partnerships and consortia, and yes, there is a brain drain. Talented people go elsewhere, and when they do, a country doesn't just lose people, it loses its future capacity, and it can take decades to rebuild what's lost. And I think we know it very intimately from the history of our country. But we've also seen this happen recently. In Hungary, the government took control of the Academy of Sciences, transferring its institutes to a state-controlled body. Universities were also brought under a control of politically loyal boards. In Poland, we saw increased pressure on scientific institutions through funding mechanisms and legal reforms. Basically, nationalist narratives were favored and academic freedom narrowed. I think both countries' developments reflects a broader pattern of illiberal governance, where basically science is seen not as an independent source of knowledge, but as a domain to be aligned with state ideology and political loyalty. It would be easy to assume that these issues are confined to our region, but as many of you know, perhaps better than I do, political interference in science has also been a serious concern elsewhere, for example, in the United States. Now, under the Bush administration, for instance, officials altered or suppressed climate reports from agencies like NASA to downplay human impacts. Also, research related to reproductive ethics was similarly politicized. While the Obama administration made efforts to protect scientific integrity, the situation worsened significantly during the two Trump administrations. Scientific findings were edited, advisory boards were reshuffled or filled with industry-linked figures, and public health agencies were pressured to align their messaging with political agendas. In politically sensitive areas, such as climate change, gun violence, or reproductive health, research has often been shaped more by Congress than by scientific consensus. And don't get me started on my own field, Middle Eastern studies, where we have seen a different but equally troubling form of interference, with hundreds of scholars and students have been deported or had their visas revoked, terminated, or denied altogether. Now to decentralization of science. I would argue that centralized science systems often miss nuance. They may overlook local or disciplinary needs, whereas decentralized models allow researchers to respond more flexibly to environmental, social, or industrial challenges close to home. They also support diversity of ideas. Multiple approaches can flourish without being filtered through one national or bureaucratic lens. This leads to richer, more innovative science, and in centralized systems, I would argue that decisions and funding are often slow, overly standardized, or politicized. Decentralization, on the other hand, allows quicker responses, tailored calls, and leaner processes, often led by people who actually understand the research landscape. Also, decentralization builds resilience because a decentralized system is less fragile. It can withstand political changes, funding shocks, or institutional crises more easily because knowledge production is spread across multiple centers, not concentrated in a few national bodies or ministries. Now, in my mind, closely connected with this is the importance of scientific self-management. I would argue first that scientists know how knowledge is produced with its uncertainties, long timelines, and non-linear paths. They appreciate nuance and are more likely to support exploratory or high-risk work that may not look efficient in a spreadsheet. And second, they can assess quality and potential. Peer review, strategic steering of research themes, and mentorship all require deep subject knowledge. A manager without research experience may miss the substance and get lost in metrics. Finally, as a representative of the Academy of Sciences, allow me a few words about non-university research institutions like the Czech Academy of Sciences. Again, I would argue that these institutions carry out high-impact, long-term, and often interdisciplinary research. They tackle challenges that don't always fit into university structures, projects that need stable teams, infrastructure, or time horizons beyond a grand cycle. From fusion energy to memory studies, from fundamental biology to social cohesion, these institutes serve society in ways that universities alone can't. Of course, don't get me wrong, they are not competitors to universities, they are partners. They transfer knowledge into education, innovation, and policy, and their independence and stable public funding are not just academic concerns. They are investments in a country's intellectual sovereignty. So basically, to sum it up, first, autonomy protects the credibility, creativity, and international relevance of science. Decentralization allows for pluralism, flexibility, and resilience, and non-university research plays a unique and irreplaceable role in the scientific ecosystem. If we want science to remain a public good, not a political tool or private commodity, I would like to believe that we need to protect these foundations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, I would like to ask Zdeněk Strakoš for the contribution. And I would really like to thank Zdeněk for his contribution, many years contribution for the ERC grants and for the work with Czech scientists with respect to European grants.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank to the Learn Society for this most honorable invitation. I'll keep my introductory speech short, and I have an advantage that many of the things that I'm going to say are just repeating in the other words, the things that I've already said by the previous ones. So, first, just obvious stuff. Science definitely needs freedom. There's no doubt about that. It's based on curiosity. But freedom cannot go without responsibility. And responsibility for the profession. And this responsibility requires virtues like humility, honesty, and professionality. Without that, it simply doesn't work. It's just a makeup. And science is hierarchical. That means it must build hierarchy, but the hierarchy is not the hierarchy of power. It's a hierarchy of collaboration and service. And of course, science needs funding. Without that, it cannot do its work. And what is important here, that the role of science, as it was very beautifully reflected in this morning lecture, that its role in society goes much more behind just research, knowledge, etc. There are some other functions. Well, our society, it's not entirely healthy, and science is not immune to some, say, signs of things that don't go really right. First of them, there's fragmentation. It's visible in some fields more clearly than in the others, but it's, I think, seen everywhere in science. And also massification goes hand in hand with superficiality and loss of information. And many times we talk about evaluation and peer review and everything, but many times what we can see averaging instead of confronting arguments and trying to find what is right and what is wrong, instead of doing average and count some points. And again, we have seen in the previous speeches that science is also becoming a business. And that means that sometimes you can see the fight for particularities instead of common good. And one of the great guys who lived in the, say, last century formulated that the shift is from the it to the emphasizing the I too much. And that's one of the roots. Okay, just a little bit general about the organization. Well, if science is based on hierarchy, and hierarchy is hierarchy by leadership, so the important role here is of the bottom-up principle. That means the initiative of individuals should determine the programs. And this initiative should be supported in the best possible way, in a flexible way, by the institutions. And that can create the dynamic of science. And because science is dynamical, so organization must also be dynamical. That means any petrified structure cannot simply deliver. I'm not going to talk more about this, just leave it for the discussion later. But, just turn a little bit to the situation here without addressing what are the problems, but how we try to help. And we try to help through helping applicants for ERC grants, it was already mentioned by our president. Who does it mean we? We is a group of volunteers who started 15 years ago with this help, and they do it together with Technology Center Prague. And what is help? What does it mean? How much work is done? It's very exhaustive. It's about 15 mostly full-day workshops over the year and almost uncountable individual, say, guidance for the applicants. And what is the goal of this? The goal is primarily to help young people, young talented scientists, to establish their independence and to confront this independence with the world scale level. That means the top level that can be found in the world. And I would like to mention on this occasion that, of course, we are trying to help the applicants, but we could do little if these applicants are not ready for application. And here the key role is of the programs, kind of pre-programs, like Primus or Lumina or Marsh of Charles University and Academy and Zürich University, that really helps to prepare to give independence to young people very, very early after PhD. And that's absolutely essential. Okay. Well, this is question mark. I'm not really sure whether ERC is accepted as a really important thing in the Czech Republic. If it is, of course, demanding, but it is also very stimulating, because working for a good ERC applications really changes the way the individual people do their research afterwards, perhaps for decades. And, many times I've heard things like, well, ERC, it's good, but it's not really for us. We'll just exploit local funding because it's easier in some sense. Well, just an example, the last year already was mentioned that we got really surprising success that in the last consolidator ERC call, we got a success rate 27%, which was the highest from all the countries that participated. And it got a lot of publicity, but I was a bit, I would say, surprised that the resonated question in this over the society, including the scientists, was, will it be repeated? In the sense, will they repeat it? I don't know, who are they? Because I think this is the case for all of us. Thank you very much for your attention. I will be happy for discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. And our next speaker is Jana Klánová.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. I'm professor of environmental chemistry of Masaryk University in Brno, where I am leading the RECETOX Center, which is the European Center of Excellence set up in collaboration with ETH in Zürich and UCL in London, and also coordinating the European research infrastructure for human exposome. And what I would like to talk about today is more my personal experience of someone who coordinated a number of the projects worth more than 100 million euros. And those projects were coming from the European Fund, structural projects, and various national funding schemes too. And again, I will repeat some of the thoughts that you already heard from the previous speakers. When I looked at the name of the session today, Organization of the Science, two topics came to my mind. One of them is the science management, and the other one, science administration. And there are big differences between two of them, and sometimes they are replaced or messed up. When I'm talking about the science management, this is something that I deeply appreciate. I believe that in our country, the science management was not really existent some 15, 20 years ago. And I think an important part was played during the first European strategic and investment funds that came to the country around 2010, because they were so complex and complicated from top and the bottom that it really created the opportunity for the development of the science management, because without that, they couldn't be implemented in the country. We just have to be aware that if we are talking about the science management, it's a support function of the research strategy. So strategy should be present at the level of the government, also institution, research group, the individual. Of course, they have different qualities. I don't want to speak about the strategy of the whole government or the country, because we all know how many different strategies we have in this country. But I think a very important role should play the institutions that should have their research strategies. And then the research management is the implementation of this strategy. And it's very hard to implement something that doesn't exist or is very blurry. And I think this is one of the problems of the Czech Republic, because who are the science managers? Are they scientists or are they organizers of the science? I believe it must be based on the collaboration of both. And somebody before me said that you can't really be the good science manager if you don't have a deep understanding of the whole area. At the same time, you can't be the science manager only if you are the scientist and you have no skills and no experience. And I'm not speaking for the universities. I don't really think that the Czech university system is very favorable to inspire experienced researchers and research managers to go up to the hierarchy and go for the positions where they can decide about the strategy of the whole institution. The system where we don't have the president university who would have a power really to set up the strategy and work for it and build the management support that would make it happen is not really working. It is interesting because a couple of times I was invited to the meetings of the Czech Association of the Research Managers. And sometimes I feel they are further than really the scientists, because this is really the generation of the people that was born 10, 15 years ago. They are really working on their own education, collaborating with the international institutions, supporting the research managers. They want to push the Czech science forward. And sometimes I feel these are really the scientists who are holding them back. Very often because, of course, not everybody from the science is interested to put some effort into the research management. Many of them feel that their wholly science is so important that they can give any time into the research management. And I'm trying to convince at least the colleagues from my institution that it must be us, that we need to volunteer to go to the academic positions, to the managerial positions, because who, if not us? So that much about the management, but then administration. This is something very different, and sometimes I have a feeling that research administration is something that is ruling the Czech science in the last years. These are the support functions that should help bureaucratic administrators to run the projects. And sometimes this is really the cage that is holding the scientists and not allowing them to grow and do the science properly. And it is also consuming a lot of science funds. And it is not only in the Czech Republic, but also at the European level. I told you that I have a lot of experience from the European projects, and they are getting bigger and bigger. I've been involved in the European project since the 5th framework program. At that time, the projects were much smaller and better focused. I'm not talking about ERC. I'm more talking about the European collaborative projects. They are bigger and bigger. In the current program, the European partnerships are sometimes worth 400 million euros with more than 150 partners. How does such a thing can be managed? Of course, it needs a lot of support function, and then majority of money is swallowed by the administration. And even some of my European colleagues, scientists that are very experienced with running the European projects, they are not willing to do it anymore. And they are hiring the companies. So what I'm seeing is that there is more and more companies in the European market that made their business on science management. It means they mastered the craft on how the project should be written to be successful. And they are charging big money. So pretty much if you hire such company, you spend all the indirect cost of your project just paying the company, because there is a success fee and then the implementation fee. Very often the condition is that if the project is successful, they will also implement the project. And it is taking a lot of money from the European research. And this is, of course, translated also to the national programs, because we are having a lot of structural funds. It is similar. If those are big projects, the ministries or European Commission needs to have some tools how to check on the scientists whether they are performing. So this is how the whole system of deliverables and milestones was invented. This is not something that is important for science. It is only important for reporting that makes the administratives easier to handle the job. It's growing so big that the scientists, rather than creating the open source data or writing the scientific publications, they are writing deliverables and milestones that are lengthy. I don't want to say that nobody reads them, probably administrative personnel reads them, but then they don't understand them. And this is how we are wasting the capital of the scientists. So sometimes in Europe, we have very good intentions and very wrong ways how we are trying to implement it. Today, we started discussing how difficult is the situation of science in the US. I just returned from Washington when I spent the week in discussions with my colleagues. Of course, their situation is very tough now, but still I have a feeling that I'm more worried about the efficiency of the European science than the US science right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Great. In fact, all the idea to have the main topic of this plenary session, Organization of Science, came to me maybe a year ago when I heard that we scientists are not interested in organization of science. So I made it the main topic of this meeting. Thank you, Jana. And let's continue with Pavel Doleček, the Deputy Minister of Science.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first of all thank the Learn Society for inviting me, and also to Mr. President himself. We are in close contact and we're discussing a lot of issues concerning the science. We came from funding and now we are coming to organization. As was already mentioned, I'm now serving as a Deputy Minister for Research and Innovation. But before that, I was a Deputy Minister at Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports for Higher Education and Research, and a Vice Rector here at Charles University. So obviously, based on that, my perspective is the overall system. So when I'm speaking about the organization of science, I'm not speaking about the science itself. I'm speaking about the system as such. And as you can see from my presentation, I will focus more closely on the Czech situation. So hopefully it will be interesting, not just for the Czech audience, but also for our foreign hosts and guests. So my main argument or my thesis is quite simple. I would say that there are huge challenges ahead, maybe not challenges, but opportunities. I think that we are quite able to identify them. But if we do that, we need to confront them with the weaknesses of our system and then ask ourselves a quite crucial question, whether we are able with our current system be able to face the challenges, or let's say use the opportunities. And my main hypothesis, which could be corroborated or falsified, as what Karl Popper said, that we didn't do our homework. We are focusing on particular research topics. We're discussing a lot about administration. We're discussing a lot about open science, about finding excellence and such. But we are not discussing the system itself, whether our institution and our stakeholder management is up to date, whether it reflects the, I would say, good experience and praxis from other European countries. I'm not saying that our system doesn't match that, but regardless our election, which would come in next few months, this would be a debate. So this is the reason why my last slides, as you would see them, are named future debates, because this debate will come at hand, and we just need to wait what setup of political will there will be. Now, those challenges ahead. All of those four could be defined in many lectures and many hours. So I just wanted to point them out. And as I would like to reiterate, this is from the perspective of the overall system. So you can take it as rather abstract or general, but nevertheless, this would be something that would shape our debates in next 10 to 15 years. So long-term financing strategy, obviously external influences. Jana Klánová mentioned that we are heavily dependent on the structural fundings, which would be reduced or change at least for the next period. The union funding would also change, and they are the nut that would heal the biggest pain in our system. And obviously, more and more, it's important to find ways how to engage the private funding. Throughout the last 20 years, there was quite considerable funding and investment in our Czech system, and we were able to fund to some extent a lot of institutions, a lot of teams. For the future, since we cannot say that there will be enough funding for everybody, we need to be able to identify the real quality, the clusters, the centers of excellence, if you will. And I know that the term excellence is rather well, it's controversial because we are talking about excellence a lot, but we are not able always find it. But Professor Strakoš would not agree, but because he finds the excellence within the system, but not all of us are able to find the excellence. But obviously, if we want to focus the funding, we need to focus it on excellence that has been built and in the recent years. Diversification of universities. As you can see in Czech Republic, we have more than 60, let's say, higher education institutions. We have 26 public universities, and we still think that all of those should do the same thing. There wasn't enough bravery for any diversification within the university sectors. What are the roles? What are the main topics for their endeavor? And obviously, this is also applicable, for the, let's say, non-university public sector, which is mainly run by the Czech Academy of Sciences, but it is a quite huge proportion of the institutions that are under the ministries. Obviously, I don't know what to do with that, but what I would say that these are challenges, and I would like to engage the leadership of Czech Academy of Sciences, leadership of the biggest institutes, under the umbrella of Czech Academy of Sciences, and leadership of the Rectors Conference to discuss with us whether we are willing, whether we have some kind of mode how to deal with this, because this would be an issue because there won't be enough funding for everybody. And we are not sure whether the government would be willing to spend that much of a funding or increase the funding steadily if there is no response on the other side. So what is the whole social contract about our system? This is the weaknesses. I will go quite short because they are quite frank. I think this is a problem of our system. There's a huge fragmentation, and I'm talking about the system. We have 16 providers of funding. More than 180 institutes are funded, their operational costs are funded throughout public spending. 7 ministries have their own programs for project support and not on the umbrella of our agencies. And we have more than 230 institutions that are defined as a research organization, which is a huge impact on the management of the system and obviously funding of the system and obviously on the legislation of the system. I spoke about diversification. I also spoke about limited coordination of support. We know that we need to put more funding in the research, but are we able to say what we are actually funding if there's 16 chapters? Unclear competencies of key stakeholders. I can show this picture. This is our research and innovation system. It doesn't look that bad from the picture, but based on our legislation and also praxis, there are unclear competencies between those. There is this so-called Research Development and Innovation Council and 2 main ministries running the system, but it's not quite clear who does what actually. We have a lot of ministries and providers. You can see Czech Academy of Sciences among them. We have 2 big foundation, or let's say agencies. We have regional authorities, and the green ones are the landscape of the system. I'm not saying that there is a problem with the fragmentation mainly of the institutes. I'm saying there is a problem with the fragmentation of the system of the providers. That is something that is, you cannot explain that to public. And you cannot explain that to the Minister of Finance. There are a lot of things you cannot explain to the Minister of Finance, but this is one of those. This is one of those. So, just to the end, the future debates. It is not like we are not doing anything. I think that if you look at the current changes in legislation, both in research and higher education, changes in evaluation, And also the budget increases that we accomplish. Still, we would like more, but nevertheless, there were increases. We managed to develop and improve several key areas, but we didn't touch the governance of the system itself because obviously it's a huge ordeal. I did a research, and in the last 15 years, I take it from 2009, there were series of roundtables organized by the former Prime Minister Fischer. And based on that, I took the 15 years, and we have several international audits. We have several EU counseling. We have many findings, let's say, of the Legislative Council of the Government or Supreme Audit Office, which is NKU for our Czech audience. There are like 20 examples when everybody's saying the system is fragmented, the competencies are unclear, do something about that. We were not brave enough to do that. Actually, until now, because there was like no structural debate about it. And I think that nevertheless, the outcomes of the elections, we would have to do this kind of talking in the next few years, and the external influences would shape us. And it's not bad, I would say. I would say we need a discussion. So those are, I would say, the main two questions that are ahead. Is our system capable of responding to challenges and strategic goals without undergoing significant changes in governance and the interconnection of particular sectors? I would say no, but let's debate that. Are we ready to start discussing a different and more unified governance structure? Maybe some of us are, some of us don't, as we've heard already this afternoon. And just to mention, all of the countries that we did a research and we want to align us with are able to put together the agendas of higher education and research together. And this is probably my main topic today, that we need to concentrate the higher education and research much more together because they are aligned and they are the forces for tomorrow, I would say, in a more pathetic way. So this is just my few of my thesis, and as I already mentioned, this is something that's been bothering us for several years. We were not brave enough to say it out loud. But our system of research, or the research ecosystem, the system of stakeholders and their competencies is fragmented. It's unclear. And I'm not sure how much longer we can go with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pavel. And our last speaker is Mark Mézard.
Thank you very much. I mean, much has been said by all my colleagues, and I will try to add maybe a couple of comments with respect to what has been said. I want to talk a little bit about the orientation and the support of research, the evaluation of research, which has not been mentioned that much. I think it's one of the pillars. It's something which is extremely important. And questions about funding, diversity, and selection. So we have heard a lot about research, and if you look at the question of orienting research is an important one, and it's a very difficult one. In some sense, of course, if I ask the question, what should come next? The researchers themselves are the persons who know from the dynamics of their discipline what can come next. So I think that this intrinsic dynamics, this bottom-up dynamics is very important, and it's feeding the good systems. And we have heard both Jana, Zdeněk talking about the ERC scheme. I think that the ERC scheme is extremely valuable myself, in spite, and I share with you this idea that there are some part of the administration of it which are really a bit stupid in this frame of cutting in pieces a project, etc. But still, I mean, if I go from the perspective of science in France, I would say that the ERC has saved French science, which is under-financed, like the Czech one, a bit less than the Czech one, but still under-financed. And the ERC has saved it. Why? Because as far as fundamental research is organized, ERC is a purely bottom-up scheme in which you ask the people, what is your project? What do you want to do? What do you think is something which is a new challenge that can be met? Let us face it completely. It does not mean that there is no orientation when you do that, because you have a certain number of panels. Even the division into panels tells you what will be the division of funding between various subfields. So it's not that there is no political statement about the organization. It's not just everybody comes with a project. No, you have to apply to a panel, and it happens that there is one panel in condensed matter and one panel in, art history. I don't know if it exists, but this subdivision biases the number of grants that can be given to each candidate. So I think that this bottom up is extremely good. The second aspect, which I like a lot, is I think that for funding and evaluation of funding, the European level is the right one. I mean, we always have a problem when we have grant systems, which is being sure, and we are never sure, but going in the direction where the evaluator will be at a certain distance from the people who are proposing. And I think that organizing it at the European level, in my opinion, has been something which is key. There is among the drawbacks, apart the question of administrative rules, etc., I would still maybe make a remark about, again, the organization of science, that the dominant scheme, probably in Europe these days, which is also one which is actually pushed by systems like the ERC, is a scheme in which the science is organized around a PI. This PI. When I was a young researcher, nobody would use PI. That did not exist. I mean, there was a professor, or not even. It was more horizontal than that. Now the PI is the top of a pyramid, and there is one PI and another PI. And probably, I don't know about the Czech system, so I cannot comment, but I know that, for instance, in Germany, the system has been very much shaped with this pyramid of people below each PI, let's say. And is that a good system? Well, that's certainly a system that favors application like the ones that I just mentioned that are very valuable, like ERC. I personally think that there is a value in having a lab, a group of PI, not necessarily a large group, but when you have a group of 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 PI working on areas which have strong connections, putting all these resources together brings diversity to science, it brings stability, it also decreases a bit the pressure from the grant system. When you have a very competitive grant system like the one that I have just mentioned, it is good because it brings you to think about innovative projects, really try to bring your best ideas, do your best, that's good. But if you fail, you should feel that, okay, you have to rethink. There is no tragedy in that. If you're in a lab where you share it with 3, 4, 5 persons, one has a grant, the other one does not have it, everybody is supported, and then one can go on and take this. So let's keep that in mind. I think that is one of the aspects of the old system, of the pre-PI system that I kind of miss. And it's still possible to build it, and we try actually to build it now in our lab in Milan. One point about research evaluation. Research evaluation is crucial. It has not been mentioned so much in these talks, but it was there everywhere. Probably, I think that in the beautiful loop that Gerd has been mentioning, there is this question of evaluation. It's not. I mean, there is of course the evaluation that comes from the reaction of the public, etc., and it goes directly to the minister. But let's say all the minister, the funding agencies, etc., they rely on evaluation. So what are principles of evaluation? I will say obvious things. I'm sorry I have to say obvious things, but it turns out that in some countries that I know, these obvious things are not implemented. So, for instance, I know very well some country in which you are asked, in order for promoting someone, this someone must have, in the last 5 years, something like 4 or 5 years, have a number of publications in journals in the A category. What does that mean? Well, that means absolutely nothing, because we scientists, we researchers, we are very smart at hedging this kind of systematic quantitative rules. I mean, you put a rule, and there is immediately a group of people who will do it. I mean, I know I could cite subfields of theoretical physics, will not give the name, but subfields of researchers who have quoted each other paper systematically, and they all have H index which blew up. And I know the field, and I think that there are good things in this field, but not at that level. It has been hedging strategy. Same thing, if you start to say, if you have a public, in some other countries that I know, or universities, you have a A+ category publication in one of the A+ journal, or you get extra money, you get a paycheck. Wonderful. What do people do? They hedge the thing. They make friend, or they make friend with someone in the editorial board of the A+ journal, or they will. I mean, that's normal. Human beings, and smart human beings like researchers, they do that. So we have to be aware that all these kind of blind systematic evaluation are fraud. It does not mean that bibliometry itself is useless. I think that bibliometry should be used, but it should be read by peers. Peer review is very important. And peer review must be able, when there is a discussion in a committee for hiring someone, for promoting someone, there the bibliometry can come in the sense that someone says, but how come that this person in that field has produced so little? And then maybe there is a colleague we say, this person has produced so little, but there is this paper which has changed the field forever. Okay, that's what we should do. And in all of the very good institutions, when it goes to hiring or promotions, it's not so much the number of papers which are published, which again can be hedged very easily, but it is maybe people should submit, give the list of your 5 best papers and explain why they are important. And I think this is something that it should be complemented by bibliometry, but this is a way. This is a way to do it. And I'm sorry really to say these things which are kind of straightforward, but again, many countries that I know which do not apply them. So I think that this is we have to keep in mind. Of course, apart from the publications, all kinds of international comparisons are absolutely crucial. International recognition. It can go from international prizes, invitations in very important conferences. In general, having it at having the comparison at the international level is something which is extremely valuable and should be really implemented as much as possible. Then I would like to have one point on diversity and selection. Gil has mentioned that in his talk about the question of diversity and gender diversity. In his case, this raises the question of also student selection in some sense. That you have been head of a school which is extremely selective, and in which we had an experiment took place in 1985. Before 1985, there were 2 Écoles Normales Supérieures in France. There was one for male and one for female. And they brought to the science a diversity of researchers of very high level. And in 1985, it was decided that there would be the fusion of the 2 of the two écoles normales. Makes sense. Immediately, there was some warning about that there would be, people were warning that there would be a dominance of a male entering in the science and female entering in the humanities. And that is what took place. It took place to a large extent mostly in science. In humanities, maybe it was 55-45 or something like that. But in science, all of a sudden, 75-25, 80-20. I mean, very big difference. And was it that before that, the female scientists who went through the École Normale for girls were not as good? Well, no. Some of them have had beautiful careers, a wonderful contribution to science, etc. It is something more subtle, more complicated, which is very cultural, which has to do with the fact of how science is seen in the society, how people push the boys more than the girls to prepare for this very, very, very selective and very strong competition of applying to this system of grandes écoles. So it created a bias, and we saw the consequence. So it means that one has to be very careful with these ideas, and it means that yes, probably one has to take into account in the selection system what is the background, what is the cultural background, what are the obstacles for this or that category of people to really compete at the power level with the other people. And one has to try to balance that, to counterbalance that. So that, I know that I am touching a very delicate subject. I mean, if President Trump was in the audience, he would not let me speak, because this has to do with affirmative action. Affirmative action, by the way, there is a beautiful book that I recommend to you if you want to know about that. It was created in the 1920s. There's a book by our colleague Carabel for his, I think from Berkeley, or is it from California? The book is called The Chosen, and here he explains the affirmative action policy in the big three universities in the US, Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. And over the years. Why was it created in the 1920s? It was plain anti-Semitism. And the universities at that time, they were saying, well, there are too many Jewish students applying, and they will all the fellowships. We have to do something to compensate. Okay, they did something. They invented something which was leadership. So among the criterion of selecting someone, there would be leadership. What would mean leadership? Leadership who meant white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That was a good leader. So you would say that's a very circumstantial moment of a very sad era of humanities. That's true. But since then, there have been some kind of criteria applied to selection, which have always existed with various ideas. For instance, in the 60s, there were even complaints from the board of professor to the dean of admission at Harvard, and they were complaining that there was not enough weight given to academic skills, because there was all kind of things that we know. There were, good at sports, good at etc. And the dean answered at that time, well, we want to have the largest impact on the society. And maybe having the largest impact, it's not only selecting only people who are the best academic skills, but it is also having people who have a large influence, who have it's called a legacy in the US, etc. And so there has been this dispute. It has been more or less hidden. It came back in recent time with a fraction of students from Asian origin, etc. But it is always there. And one has to understand that when one says there is no affirmative action, no bias of any kind, it is never true. A bias is always present because you create the condition for a fair competition. And the fair competition, if some category of people have not been able to train on par with the other for the fair competition, it's not fair. And this is always the case. So my point for that is that I think one has to be very careful. One has to diversify the systems. When you have a very monolithic system, it creates these hedging strategies, and then there are the winners and the losers. And so you need to find diversity of ways of getting people inside the system. And I mentioned that for the student, but I think it's also true for many other aspects of selection within the academic world. A last word about innovation. I heard the previous talk. Not only innovation, but also general funding of research and development. I wanted to mention that in the year 2000, there was a EU strategy, the Lisbon strategy for EU. It had 3 targets. Improve the average European employment rate to bring it to 70% at least. Improve the employment rate for women to bring it to above 60%. It was a 20 years horizon. And have the total R&D intensity above 3%. The first goals have been reached. The third one, we are very far from it. And in fact, if you think that in the third one, basically with the European system, it would mean 1% of public spending in research and development and 2% of business spending. We are at the moment at 0.74%. So we are very, very far. It is the objective which has not been followed. And Germany made a lot of progress. Germany was at 0.87 in 2020 and is now at 1.1. France decreased from 7.76 to 0.74. And the Czech Republic, I'm sorry, I went to see the numbers, it also decreased from 0.62 to 0.58. And there are countries like Ireland or Romania, which are at 0.16, very, very far from this objective of 1%. And so there is this disparity. Some of my colleagues in the Accademia dei Lincei have Guamaldi, Antonelli, Maiani, and Parisi have drafted a project paper so that in the next 20 years there would be systematic investment in such a way, also helped by the EC, in order to bring back this spending in research and development at a more homogeneous level within Europe. I think this is very necessary. I mean, we should, and we try to think about our organization, our evaluation, etc. But if we do not have a basic funding, it will not work.
Great, thank you very much. So that's it. Questions, remarks, complaints.
And hundreds of topics. I'm actually afraid that there have been too many topics to start with that I don't know where to start really. So I would address just one, and this is an open science point. I don't know if this is the most pressing one. If not, please ignore it and discuss something else. But for me, I'm very much advocate of open science and open sources, but in the presentation, there have been omitted number of collateral damages that open science is causing to all of us, and I think it should be discussed and should be mentioned. And this is something we should because something we can influence, right? As opposed to many other topics. So I am sure I don't have to list all of them because you probably know them as well as I do. Predatory publishing is one of them. The change of the centuries-old system where the publisher wants to publish the best possible publications because this is the way how to sell them best, to the system where publishers doesn't care about the quality of the publications because they get the money from the authors, not from the readers, which really fundamentally changes the attitude of publishers, authors, and the readership. And I don't think this major change has been really thought through, and we have the tools how to handle it because the ocean of excuse me, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, bullshit we are being covered by, it's difficult to manage. So if this is something you would agree with me, or you would have suggestions what to do about it, I can't even agree with the notion that the publishing is getting cheaper. It's certainly not our experience. Actually, we pay much more as an institution and as an author. So there's a number of issues. Again, for me, as an advocate of open sources and or open science, that should be addressed, and they are not adequately addressed at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may react to your point, it very much depends on the type of agreement actually that exists in a given country with the publishing industry. And national agreements, such as the German one, which is called DEAL, Deutsche Allianz-Lizenz, or something like that it means, has been a very successful one, actually. And it reduces the cost of publishing considerably from the average price of a research article or research review of the 1,800 euros to something like 2,750. That's, provable. These are, kind of solid numbers. As far as predatory journals are concerned, this came about with online publishing. Of course, these people like to make a cheap buck by, publishing your papers for a fee, don't have to print anything anymore. So it's a kind of simple rules. But I would say these predatory or fake journals, they are not difficult to tell apart from the bona fide ones, like with predatory or fake conferences. It's just, you see immediately what it's all about once you receive an invitation, or at least, I don't have problems with it. My colleagues don't. Can you remind me of your additional point?
We can distinguish them, and we are certainly doing it. And every scientist that is worth of the name would do it. So it's not a problem of the people sitting in this room. It's just that this whole system created motivation for predatory journals that have not been here before, because they can now survive. And this motivation has not been here before, because now the authors pay rather than the readers. So that's the major problem. One additional point: I know about the German agreement with the publishers, and I comment our German colleagues. I don't really understand how come that this is not a European issue. How come that EU didn't take the initiative? And we do have EU, and it didn't work here. And the smaller countries as us, or Hungary or Slovakia, are unfortunately unable to compete with Elsevier or other major publishers. So that's the problem.
Excellent point. I was sitting in the room with some British colleagues who were actually hearing about how well it works, open science, open access publishing in Germany, and they were, asking the reasons, and the answer was pretty simple. The Germans have this national agreement, and that wields huge power. The publishing houses, they mean nothing without our publications. And if you have a national agreement, and I would very much urge actually my former compatriots, to try to do something similar. Quality of the papers. You mentioned that, who guarantees the quality of the papers? Well, the peer review. Of course, the journals are run, by editorial boards, and it's important for these editorial boards to be independent of the publishers, not to be paid by them or not to be their employees. Be academics who just do this service to their community. And this is also something that I very much enjoy doing.
Thank you very much. It's certainly a crucial, extremely important topic, but let's move on. Lenka?
I actually wanted to comment on the same topic. Lenka Zdeborova, at EPFL, the sister of ETH in Switzerland. It seems to me that what we discussed so far about the scientific publishing is maybe approaching it from maybe the wrong side, because we discussed who pays. Is it the reader who pays, or is it the person who publishes who pays? But maybe we should discuss, where does the money go? So there are also kind of a dichotomy there, right? There are publishers where the money goes to the system, to just pays the system, and nobody profits from it. And then there are the publishers that do it for profit, where the money goes, big part of the money goes to some investor. But for me, science is not like potatoes. If I sell a lot of potatoes, I can profit from it. Science is a public good, as we said and agreed. So I don't understand why, as a community, like any of us, keeps publishing and working for for-profit publishers. To me, if we agreed that we abolish that completely, we would solve the problem.
Yeah, and that. So thank you, Lenka. It's a very good comment, and it's a matter of logistics. And in fact, we for several years with Pavel Doleček, with National Technical Library and the Learn Society, we are trying. That's our priority, and it's logistically complicated because it's a single soldier decides to desert, he's shooting. But it's somehow logistically, it's a marvelous problem which we all need to somehow work on.
To me, there was a slide that Zdeněk showed us with the, the scientists, what we do. The second point was responsibility. That as scientists, we have responsibility. For me, this is a part of the responsibility. We should just be responsible and do it the right way.
Thank you. Let's go to another topic. Unless you want, no. But, okay, I have the microphone. Yeah, please.
So there were many worries about freedom of science. I would like to say that I was surprised a few weeks ago. There was a poll by German scientists about freedom of science in different countries. And that was the first time I saw Czech Republic first. We ranked in any scientific endeavor, of course, we ranked first. So freedom of science here is so far, let's not jinx it, but it's so far very good. The providers, and so we get a lot of freedom. What we would like to hear from you, from ETH, from Israel, and so on, to do better science. We got all the freedom, I think. And we need better science, okay? It's egalitarian society after the Hussites, pretty much still. And
I disagree. It's not egalitarian, but...
okay, well, you may disagree, but I have my point here. So the thing is that if we have evaluations, the best go at best 2 or 3% more. The losers, in brackets, get 2 to 3% less, not 20 or 30%. So how to deal with it? Of course, it's extremely difficult to sell because there is always more losers than winners. So who would go for it? But in some countries, you did, and you are fine, and you have no revolutions there, and your science is still way better than ours. So if there is some magical advice or even standard advice, I would love to hear it.
Gerd?
Yeah, thank you very much for this important contribution. And I'm speaking now for ETH, probably not for my sister. The problem that we have, and we have to admit that we have it, is the definition of scientific excellence. But what is scientific excellence? We always claim all the day that we are only hiring scientific excellence. I had hours with my Schulleitung president and vice president to discuss how we define scientific. It always comes up at the end of the day to a number game. And we all know that we have the idealistic view that in the commissions, we have the commissions where the department has not, the hiring commissions, the department has never the majority. Always the majority is from outside. The head of the commissions is always from a complete different field. I have to say, at the end of the day, the members of the commissions, they fly in, and before touchdown in Zurich airport, they look up their ABCs and DH indices and so on to get a rough number. Sorry, that's simply the reality. And so we are. I admit, I'm just coming here from a discussion with my president. We are stuck with the problem of the definition of scientific excellence, and that will be not easy. It will probably be an industrial process. I've discussed this very long with the management of Novartis, with the higher management of Novartis, and the HR department of Novartis has the same problem. What is scientific excellence? Not just because the chemists are coming from ETH Zürich, it's scientific excellence. Up to now, this was a tradition.
Michal? Yeah. I just would like to add something what Jula Lukáš told about evaluation of science and different aspects of it. The publications in different types of journals are also used as an argument for academic promotion. And academic promotion creates professors. And still I'm missing. Charles University tries to decrease value of the predator journals up to 0.1 level against the valuable journals. But still we are missing some general agreements among the rectors of all Czech universities or all Czech research institutions, just to say, no, those publications are not part of academic promotion process. This would be very important because of professors is someone who is leading the research group and is asking for independence. And this should be changed.
Thank you. Yvonne?
I have maybe a little bit provocative response to your contribution about the recognition of excellence in science and how to define it. I am very liberal in my thinking, and I think that some categories is very difficult to define, and you should feel it. If we take an example from classical music, if someone is good, you know he or she is excellent, and there is no need to define it. And I think if the community is not able to recognize excellence in science, I would maybe compare it to the term thinking out of the box, providing breakthrough ideas. There is no need to define it. You should understand it or not. This is my little bit provocative contribution.
Very good, thank you. It's, yes. So, of course, this is a great idea, but isn't it a little bit going down to compare, let's say, to try to measure the science by music or let's say, describes that we are hopeless or whatever. Yes.
I have even more provocative idea. I think excellence in science is similar to pornography in this term. It's difficult to define, but you understand when you see it, you know.
Thank you, Zdeněk.
I have two little comments. One, I don't share the opinion that the peer review has an absolute value. If there is no discussion between the parties, it can completely fail. I'll give you one example. It's a real example, not a recent one. From one paper we submitted, we challenged some widely spread opinion for decades in our field. Then we got a referee report, and the referee report said, does it mean that these 500 people who quote that paper are fools? Of course, they are not false, but it is wrong. In mathematics, it's easy to prove. So that's the point about peer review. Excellence. For what I found really, for me, it was revealing within the RC. There is a way how to find out whether it is good or not. I don't like the word excellence, whether it is good or not. This very sharp discussion, whatever you say as a member of the panel, you have to defend to these other members. That's the only way. If there is no such discussion, there is no guarantee that the peer review will not go wrong.
Thank you. Okay, we are all scientists, so we concentrate on evaluation and publication, but it would be great to speak a bit more broadly about aspects of organization of science.
The very short example, probably I'm the only one that had the chance and the money to do an experiment on that. So I founded my own funding agency.
Great to know.
You can look it up. It's called Free Innovation. The money comes from Basel industry, but it's completely independent. What we do is we ask every year, every 18 months in 3 different fields that are related to life sciences, people to send us in their weirdest proposals. And we add, if you already missed once or twice National Science Foundation grants, this will a positive credit. Okay. The process is completely anonymous. No list of papers, no names, no affiliations, no recommendations, nothing. The maximum number of pages for the proposal is 4, including pictures. The last chapter must contain an experimentum crucis, where you might be able to prove what you do. So, I do this since 10 years. They get money, 180,000 Swiss francs for 18 months, à fond perdu, no reports, nothing. After 18 months, I do a party in Basel, and all the people come and tell me what happened. We are extremely successful. A forest engineer, a female forest engineer from Southern Americas, wanted to enter with an anti-effective proposal the intensive care in medicine, and made a proposal at the National Science Foundation. You can imagine what happened. Division 3, medicine, female, Southern America, forest engineer. Are you crazy? She came to us. In the review group was the head of a Max-Planck-Institut. He stood up and said, I want to see this lady, and if I pay them personally out of my pocket. In the meantime, she has a normal professorship at Neuchâtel, and the project is the NASA because they fear some kind of infections in their space station. So that is simply, I did an experiment, and I think these things work. These things work, and we have simply to have the braveness to come up with these things. And the most important thing for me was 5 years ago, the Swiss National Science Foundation adopted the model. They gave me a telephone call and said, can we have it? I said, okay, you have it. And they call it Spark. So you can also look it up. A little bit less money, a little bit less time, but it's exactly the technology.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes?
Okay, so I would like to make a comment, maybe bringing the discussion in a different direction. I guess I wasn't briefed on the background of why we have this panel discussion and where there's actually no panel anymore. So I distill a little bit that from the different speeches that were there before, that maybe the background is a little bit of like how Czech science should develop in the future, in the light of
we need advice. Yeah,
you need advice. So I didn't know that was what you wanted. So like, okay, so I was I try to give a little bit of advice from a Danish perspective. I don't know. Maybe I can try. I was very impressed with the speech of your government representative, Deputy Minister. No, I don't know where you are. And I would like to point out one aspect. I think you mentioned that you were actively thinking about this point of stability. I think stability of funding and stability of the system. I think the point of stability of a basic science research endeavor for a country is very, very important. And I think it's very important. I think that should really be a focus, like you're focusing on. And I've been at ETH, and that's why we're talking about peer review, because stability is not the problem in Switzerland, right? So that was that's certainly not the problem in Switzerland. Yeah, there is no mention of that. It's the most stable system you could possibly imagine. Only second stable system is Germany. I think it's extremely stable, and I tell you from a Danish point of view. In Denmark, and I used to also live in the UK, where it's also not as stable. In Denmark, we have a very dynamic system, and I think stability comes with disadvantages, namely of being not very dynamic. And in Denmark, it's a very, very dynamic system. I think also the UK is a very dynamic system, with its advantages of being a very dynamic system and its downsides of being maybe a little bit going boom and bust. And in Denmark, a lot of the research is driven by private foundations. And basically all of our quantum research activity, this is a 50 people strong activity, is entirely driven by external funding from basically, in addition to European funding in ERC and so on, by one company called Velox, which is owned by a foundation making these slanted roof windows. So they fund us, and another company that you all know is Novo Nordisk. Is the largest stock market capitalization, largest company in Europe. By at the moment making this weight loss medication has been going through the roof. This company is owned by, in majority, and actually not only voting majority, but I think an actual majority, by a foundation called the Novo Nordisk Foundation. So a lot of the money that comes through this medication is going into this foundation, which is a non-profit. So it pushes it into the research landscape. And for a small country, this is a huge amounts, right? So this is fantastic, right? It's amazing. And it's amazing, but it comes also with a challenge. Namely, the challenge in how do you, in such a system, the outputs of this foundation, they're vastly outnumber the amount of funding from the government into the National Science Foundation. So this is, I think, it's a point to keep in mind when shaping and thinking about the future of your research system, and how do you ensure. And I think Denmark is actively thinking about how can we actually ensure this, right? Stability in such a flourishing system. And I think this is an important point to keep in mind when you shape the system and when you think about how to do this. And I don't really...
Thank you again. Thank you very much. In fact, can I ask a similar question to Mark? What you would think could be a recommendation for us? Or for the...
No, I really don't feel that I am enough knowledgeable of the Czech system to give a recommendation. But one thing that was striking to me in the presentation by the Vice Minister is importance of having some kind of diversity. You said at some point we were never courageous enough to decide what are the missions of each of the universities. We think they are all equal. We have faced the same problem in France for many years. In France, we have 70-something universities. And on the paper, they are all equal, with the same mission, the same duties, etc. Still, if I ask to each of you which university you know in France, at the end of the day, maybe we find 7, maybe we find 8, 10, well, not more than that. Does not mean that the other universities are not useful. They are useful to the country. They have, you have a university, as I said this morning, it has a regional importance. It has an impact on its environment. It creates a whole ecosystem of cultural and also economic value, very important. But it's not necessarily competing with the top 50 universities in the world, as far as research is concerned. So I think that admitting that is also, it's a first step. I mean, it's always difficult. In France, it was never really admitted, but there was this Initiative of Excellence program, which was a program in which basically some extra money was given to some selected universities on the basis of research projects. And that was a way of differentiating. It was never accepted. I mean, all the other universities were always saying it's nonsense, etc. Still, the ones that got it are the ones that you know, and which are more active in research. So I think one has to face that. It does not mean that one should not give money to the other universities, but not necessarily for being the first uniformly in all research subjects. Maybe a university which specializes in something in biotech of some kind or whatever, or in ancient studies, it's worth something. Or maybe it's specialized, it has a very important project and capacity in training good students in that area, and that is a value. So, but one has to diversify the criteria and the funding. But I think that accepting this diversity is something very important. And then, as I said this morning, and I disagree with, I don't remember who was the speaker who was talking about the institutional system in here, saying we have a lot of research institute. And as I said this morning, in my opinion, one should really try to go more in the system in which research is mostly done within the university system. Sorry, it was maybe you who are, yeah. It was, in my opinion, we have to go more in a system in which research is done within the universities. Pure research institutes, they are valuable on some specific aspects. When you need a critical mass, when you have a very specific project, when you want to run a big instrument. I am advocating at the moment that I think that Europe should be the new CERN for artificial intelligence. It means big instrument, big computers, but also the lab with the researchers and the engineers capable of developing, and with a very clear, specific, applied technical objective. The first year is you develop an independent, fundamental, large language model, European-based, so that we do not depend anymore on DeepSeek or on Llama. That is, that's a very specific objective. There, you need a research institute, because no university can do that. With the budget, it's a budget in not that much at the European scale, but it's a budget of maybe 2 billion a year and buying the big computer. It's something. Okay. So, but it can be done. And there you need an institute. But having an institute for this and that subfield, I'm not so sure that it is the way to go. I'm sorry to, but it's a debate. And again, I'm speaking in kind of general terms, and I don't know the specific situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So let me ask, so I have the microphone, so I will ask by myself, and then, no, okay. Matthias, please go. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I would like to give a comment to your talk, Mr. Doleček. In Germany, we have certain contributors also to research. There is the Fraunhofer, which is application-oriented, and there's the Max-Planck, which is fundamental research, and there's federal research, and then there's also the universities. I think this is quite efficient because it is well known what is the task and the key customer, to whom the research is directed. And inefficiency comes up after a while when the actual research question has been worked on for several years, and then there is a need for continuation of this institute, for instance, and it is very difficult to close it down. And then the institute itself proposes, come on, we could do this and that in the future, and that could be our new direction. And maybe there should be, I would say, the braveness to even also close down and take the money for new institutes and new research ideas and so on. I think some of the ineffectiveness comes from long working institutes which have actually lost their primary reason.
I think, thank you very much. Let me, so now I will use the occasion. Let me ask Gil, because it looked to me that a question. I really liked very much your presentation in about the history and the development of the university, and it's for me it was very somehow against the trends in breeding and so on, which is something which of course we face in Prague. And then your of course, and it's that it of course it works extremely well, as your university is in mathematics is top. It's really incredible. It's somehow it looked to me that you are able to educate extremely good people, which then stay. So is that the right understanding of the success, or is it in something else?
I didn't think about it. Sometimes you also need the luck.
Yes.
I would trade some of the scientific success with luck in other aspects of life, because we face very serious difficulties. I don't know. I think one thing that I mentioned in this answer is that also you need some sort of self-confidence. So let me say about we are both coming from combinatorics, and combinatorics was not so much appreciated for many years. And I never thought this is so bad. I mean, it's okay. Maybe it's not deserve this high appreciation of other areas. And then the things change, and now it's much more appreciated. And I still don't think it's a big deal. So you need self-confidence, both individually, also as a part of a group, and also part of a community. And of course, sometimes self-confidence can be exaggerated and lead to bad places. So overall, I think we were quite in good shape. I think also and individuals have a lot of influence, like this guy, Frankel, who was quite a character. He made a lot of influence, and the others. And I think also the general environment in the institute is very important. So somehow we were lucky that one of our most prestigious, so I'm sorry I get into anecdotal issues, but our more prestigious mathematician, Fritz-Haber, was a very modest person. And this makes it really very hard to people who are not so modest, and I don't to be prima donnas of some sort. And also there were always good relations. So I think the old librarian told me that these two professors, Amira and Frankel, they had some big dispute between them. This was the last time there was a big quarrel in the department. Maybe part of the fact that we live in fairly uncertain circumstances and all sorts of dangers also give this sort of community. We were not able to keep all the people. Some people came and then moved on to other places, and some people join us at an older age. And so I don't know what is the recipe for success to the extent that we were successful, but I think it's also a value to do research. It's a value to teach, and I think primarily our job as scientists is teaching. It's nice, the research is very nice, and it also helps teaching, but we are teachers, we teach a lot of students. So from time to time, some students remind me that I taught them discrete mathematics in the first year. So we are very lucky compared to artists and painters and musicians. So it's completely different world. So in art, unless you are extremely good, you cannot make a living. And in music also, and in science, there is a large percent of scientists that get salaries, to get position, in many cases tenured position, and they can pursue their dreams and their hopes. And sometimes they win grants, sometimes they don't win grants, sometimes they manage to publish in journal of type A and sometimes not. But these are fairly secondary things. Of course, there are also people who are good and cannot get positions. But people with positions, they have very sweet life.
Thank you very much. And it reminds me actually what Mark was speaking about this collegiality in the research group, not the single peaks, but somehow the whole community, the peaks working together. It reminds me exactly this. Yes.
If I may, I'm a bit surprised about the kind of the way the inbreeding. I mean, it's amazing that it worked in your department, but I mean, to me, one of the obvious things that this is not a good thing if it is done too much, in the sense.
What everybody says, but apparently in the deals.
But maybe it can maybe work in fields where the questions are well established and agreed and have not been solved yet. So maybe then kind of continuing the expertise makes sense, perhaps. But to me, as a scientist, we usually start with the PhD, and when we are successful, it kind of goes well, and we become part of that community, and we have some papers, and people know about those works, and it starts to feel great that we are recognized and can discuss with others. And one kind of builds a certain comfort zone around that success. But then if one stays in that environment, one stays in that comfort zone, it has the risk to kind of degenerate. To me, the push to then establish a new group, a faculty position elsewhere, where there is not the same language spoken in the department, where every colleague, I have to again explain them what's even the point of the questions that I want to be asking and confront with how they are thinking about it. It really, this kind of push away from the comfort zone, to me, it's essential to kind of the career development of a great majority of young scientists. So it may work in some particular circumstances, but I would be very careful about generalizing it.
So what you are saying is that we somehow, Gil and Mark, say how great it is to have comfort zone, and you say that it's also great to be out of comfort.
It makes you grow to be out of your comfort zone as a scientist.
I partially agree with that. As I said, apart from the inbreeding, there was always huge incentive, especially in the times that Israel was a very poor country, for scientists to go on sabbatical, where they actually got from the university higher salaries, and they also got additional salaries often from the... So it is a balance, but I think inbreeding works well, and I think people push themselves to get out of their comfort zone. For example, I mentioned Rabin. He was one of the world's renowned logician, and then he decided to move to computer science. And as he said in some quotes that I didn't read, he was not appreciated so much by mathematicians around him. But still, he pursued this direction. And, I'm a combinatorialist, but I moved to the idea of quantum computing skepticism, which is, you'll hear about it tomorrow. So I think people have strong incentives to go away from the...
Yes, but I think this is something very cultural. Like some cultures it's encrusted in the culture that people push themselves, and some are less. So maybe in cultures where it's not part of the culture that people push themselves out of a comfort zone, it's more dangerous.
In any case, also I have, for full disclosure, said that I am one of the inbreeding in my department. So I did both bachelor, master, and PhD in the department. Then I returned as a faculty member. This is just empirical that it worked for us. I think it worked for other universities in Israel also.
I have to say that I can understand that in some cases the inbreeding can work, but generally I guess it's not the good way for the career of the scientist. Really, even from the point of view of the supervisor, I teach somebody. He learned something, and I cannot give him more than some experience. And he or she have to go somewhere to other place to have new inspiration, to have new ideas, to come to new colleagues, to build their further career. So, from my point of view, just to grow further in the scientific career, you have to have new environment, new contacts. Because just if you are for some time in some environment, you learn something, but you cannot obtain somewhat not more information or more inspiration. And new inspirations are extremely important for the further future of research.
It's a possible.
Thank you very much for the intervention. I totally agree to your arguments for two reasons. Gil, I'm sorry. And also, Mark, we heard that the bottom-up approach is the best. That is where I agree. But bottom-up and in the same field, with the argument that the scientists in the same field know best where the next direction is, I have some doubts. And that is my experience from 10 years of this free innovation endeavor, where we saw that most of the excellent contribution came from outside the field. So we were surprised that electronic engineers proposed solutions for medical interventions. We saw that people from theoretical physics went into problems how to deal with the exocrine function of the pancreas, and so on. That were the experiences. And my personal anecdote is that has really to do with culture. When 100 years ago I did part of my postdoc in Fritz-Haber-Institut in Harvard, my boss said, "Well, welcome, but I do not understand you Europeans. What is this all about, traveling through the world? I mean, I did my studies here in Harvard. I did my PhD in Harvard. I'm professor in Harvard, and I really do not see where I should go else."
Maybe just to remark that in addition to inbreeding of various types, not all, for example, in logic, there are many people who did PhD outside Israel, so some of them started bachelor and then moved outside. There is also a huge immigration to Israel. So this balanced the situation. We had huge immigration in the beginning, huge immigration in the next stage, huge immigration for the Soviet Union in the 70s and then again in the 90s. So this introduced entirely new disciplines, and there was a culture of absorbing. And to me personally, I would like to see also, as I said, more diversity, both in terms of gender, also in terms of nationality, so that larger circle of people will be attracted to academia. So far, it looks that we are extremely successful with children of professors. They like this lifestyle, and other people don't know so much about research and about academia. I mentioned, we had some success. For example, when I arrived to the Hebrew University, there were 0 women faculty. Now we have 5. But so far, we never had an Arab faculty in the Hebrew University. And I think these matters are extremely important, even beyond science, which is not the most important thing in the world. And I don't know. So it's...
I wanted just to comment, just to be sure that I am not misunderstood. I think that inbreeding is, in general, a wrong system. I think that there are, but Gil has explained actually some of the very good reasons for which actually in Israel it has worked very well. But Israel is a country in which the scientists are deeply interconnected also with the US, etc. There is a lot of flux. It's not just frozen stability, And so from this point of view, I think it's in some sense, a special case. But in general, I think that I am against this idea of inbreeding. I think it's a wrong direction to go. And what I was advocating was not so much, was not inbreeding. It was just being able to bring together researchers, actually from different horizons, who are in an attitude one towards the other, which is not just pure competition, but also collaboration. Let us get together in order to try to build something new. So I am a theoretical physicist. I joined 3 years ago Department of Computing Sciences. I'm working with someone in cryptography. I mean, get outside of my comfort zone every day, but still all these collaborations, they are benevolent. They are people who, like me, they are happy to work together with a scientific objective without seeing that we are in a direct competition on something. It's not the point. And we are, of course, in competition with the rest of the world on science, like everybody. But let us have the possibility of creating an environment which is not at all inbreeding, but which is an environment in which one can collaborate with people actually from different horizons, but with a certain type of attitude towards science and competition in science, which is not the dominant one actually in the moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to react on what Mark said previously. I kind of have to, sorry. I absolutely appreciate your comments about the university research, but I also believe that if we had more time, you would come to the conclusion that the non-university research in the Czech Republic is a very viable part of the whole research landscape. Two quick reasons. First, and we have a bunch of directors of our institutes or researchers, these institutes are not rigid. They are not doing the same things that they did 40 years ago. I hope my colleagues can attest to that. Quite the opposite. They are changing according to the needs of the current science. And second, let me update your data, because when you mentioned that the Czech Republic got to the 0.58% of the GDP, it's actually 0.51 in the last year. So we got back to the year 2010. We got 15 years back when it comes to the level of financing science. So for me, what I tried to do in my intervention earlier on is to raise some red flags. If you have these two combinations, decreasing budget on science and also the apparent thirst of some politicians to get research under tighter control, especially in our region, and I gave the example of Poland and Hungary, this might at least, raise some concerns or, get us to some state of mind and be worried and be careful. That's all I wanted to do. Thank you.
Thanks. Lenka?
Yes, thank you. I have a philosophical question for Professor Folkers. In your speech, you have mentioned a difference between data and facta, what is given to us and what is made by us. So I would like to hear your comments on this issue a bit a bit deeper. So how sharp this difference really is?
I'm a pharmacist by training, and not a philosopher. So you would forgive me if I don't use the adequate vocabulary. I refer back to one of my preferred books about how scientific sects emerge, and that is the whole work of Ludwig Fleck über die Entstehung einer wissenschaftlichen Tatsache. Published in 1933 in Basel, and then completely only remaining 10 books by the Nazis, of course. And he points out that it is extremely important to look at the thinking collective and the thinking style. Thinking collective may be a group of PIs, maybe a faculty, maybe an institute, where you have the conviction that you have to follow certain rules, certain principles, certain techniques, and that the thinking collective produces this thinking style. And then very often along this thinking style, from the data given, you find or you construct a fact, which of course in science is only accepted unless you prove the contrary. That's very clear. And he has examples from the medicine. So he worked about the Wassermann reaction. And his important hint was that he said, everyone is talking about this infective agent. Nobody is talking about the susceptibility of the individual for getting infected, because it was not part of the thought style. The bacteriologists looked only at the infecting agents, and they were only interested in the average patient that could be infected. And so he enlarged the horizon and said you have to take both parts, the infecting agent and being infected and susceptibility for being infected in. And that would be an example for the thought style. And therefore I think, data, and then the following factum is not concrete, but must always be reflected. But we always heard self-criticism is the most important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Michael.
I would like to raise a completely different point that hasn't been discussed at all. Yeah. And this is the way how, let's say, the leadership of the institutions is made. Okay, because I think that the major problem of the Czech science and research is in too much academic democracy. This is probably unpopular opinion, but I will explain it. Because in our system, the academics, the researchers, they elect their deputies, and the deputies then elect directors and directors and president of the Academy of Sciences, and so on. And like, in my opinion, this system does not really bring up the people who would be able, who would have basically have enough courage and power to make unpopular decisions and to make higher diversification, as was mentioned by Joa Lukáš. So in our system, basically, like the big stakeholders, like the leadership of the Academy of Sciences and directors, they certainly make a pressure on the government to put more money into the institutional funding of science, because they want to redistribute this money, but they don't have really courage to redistribute it with sufficient diversification, I would say. And then there are certainly grant agencies and the grant money, and basically in the recent years, the budget for grants is stagnating, and the grants get bigger because of the inflation, and then like the success rate of grants actually is decreasing. Like, so like from the point of view of a group leader of relatively successful research group, I would really urge for like strengthening of grant money, because like we cannot change the system easily, and it's embedded in laws and so on. But the accessibility of grants is absolutely crucial, and the success rate gets to numbers where even excellent groups are really having problems in getting funding. So I think this is the major problem of Czech science that really needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much. I think it's we are two more questions, Libor and perhaps Matthias first, and Libor.
I would directly like to reply to this. I mean, in the Danish system, I don't think we face the problem of having too much democracy on the scientific leadership level, on the scientific level in the Danish higher education system. And
you are happy or unhappy? Sorry, you are happy?
No, I'm not qualifying. I'm just telling you to, I don't think we face the same problem as you face, and no, you can. But I want to point out that it was said that maybe more top-down is needed in order to ensure the bravery of allowing a diversification in the higher education system. Let me point out that the bravery can also lead to a success, a sequence of merging institutions, which then can also, in Denmark we've seen a string of merging of large educational institutions, which then in some sense, right, would also lead to a loss of diversification of the education system.
Now, life is what it is. It's full of these.
So it's,
Yes, liberal. Thank you, Martin. Okay, it's sort of late, but I won't be able to sleep actually this night, keeping silent. So I really appreciate that we had something about too much democracy in our science. So I fully agree with that. Trust me, I am head of one of the largest Institute of Academy of Sciences Biology Center, Budweis, České Budějovice, downstream, upstream Vltava River. And besides that, I was quite long time science dean at one of regional universities, Bohemia Southern University, and afterwards even rector of the university. So probably this is maybe too much telling, but there are two guys in this country having about the same size of experience from the both sides, university and non-university. Jan Konvalinka, who already left the auditorium, and me. Yeah, and in the end of my, let's say, life span pass in my life, so I can tell something. So, and regarding too much democracy, sometimes I'm kidding, talking to my colleagues that sometimes we do Volksdemokratie in the country. And besides that, I need to say that compared to East Germany, actually, we didn't become part of West Bohemia, who was in American zone after World War II. So, and then we, of course, had to start after Velvet Revolution, just ourselves, all these progress transition, and it was, of course, difficult. And then we were first thinking, okay, politicians telling, we don't like Academy of Sciences, that it's something came from Moscow, and so we need to develop a network of universities. Before that, we had like 4 Stone universities and 5 technical universities. Pavel Doleček said in the beginning, currently 26 public universities. What happened with these 26 public universities? They were growing instead of our Bohemia Southern and becoming better and better. And nobody had a brave actually to distinguish in certain, probably at beginning would be the best, to distinguish between real universities like research universities and colleges, community colleges, etc. No politician actually had enough courage to do that. So then we have currently 26, some of those pretty good research universities, even in region, except Charles University, Masaryk, etc. Bohemia Southern, by the way, is the 4th or 5th in the quality base in regarding science and biomedicine, etc. Yeah. So the 26, that's extremely huge number to keep it sustainably financed. Besides that, we have from the past, from communism time, a network of institutes of Academy of Sciences. I'm not talking about, let's say, public research institutions, which are out of Academy of Sciences, just agriculture, health, etc. Just Academy of Sciences, 53 institutes in three branches: math and tech, physics, chemistry, life sciences, and then humanities and social sciences. Altogether, 53. Michal mentioned that we are facing international evaluation again, evaluated past 5 years, and we know before the result is announced that nothing happens, because some of us will be excellent, we get label, okay, excellent. And Academy of Sciences has just a policy not decrease money to any not really good performing institute, and to get just little money above to base of budget of the institute. Yeah, so that's policy to keep. Yeah, I'm always very angry with that, and telling to leaders of the Academy of Sciences, okay, if you like to do that, even in future, so then make sure that we will keep national monument, Academy of Sciences as a national monument. Definitely not following, let's say, Max-Planck-Gesellschaft or ETH Zürich or whatever. Yeah, so this is the problem: money, budgeting. Yeah, and I am not telling nothing against non-university research. I am really, it's my heart matter. I like really to keep it, but we must find sustainably financed system of this robust, extremely robust for the Czech, let's say, size of Czech Republic, to find sustainably funding way for institutes, public research institutes. And it means, to my knowledge, actually, to talk to politicians and to convince them that our country, science in our country, and of course science in the world, needs both, but it's fully silly to compete with money with our universities, because universities do usually small research. Of course, there are exceptions, and funding of such research is covered typically by Czech Science Fund. Czech colleagues knows as GAČR, Grant Agency of the Czech Republic. We cannot keep in Academy of Sciences robust research, robust projects just financed by money from GAČR. It's nonsense. So we of course do our best to get European money, etc. And the best institutions really do. Yeah. Okay. Getting a story shorter. Keep as much as possible, as much attention as possible to discuss with politicians and to find a way how to cover actually non-university system by any different system, like national research councils are in the world or whatever. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you. Excuse me.
We must end, and Michal has the last word.
I will continue what Libor told about the money. What we did, and of course, local tradition, local microenvironment is very important. But also it's very important what's happening with the money on the way from the, say, state up to the researcher. And we still don't have a system which is allowing to evaluate the individual research group on the faculties, on the in the institutes, to say, this is excellent research group, and we will perhaps finance it by institutional financing. That's what we don't have. We have the money to the deans, to the directors, and then sometimes through very complicated way it comes to researcher. This is something what perhaps could be discussed for the next time.
Thank you very much. So let me, unless there is somebody absolutely wants to say something, if not, then let me finish the discussion. It was very interesting for me. I hope for you also.